space. I think this would be an excellent project. And I
Exactly.
think there's a lot of momentum behind it. And obviously, the school department would benefit greatly from it.
Yes.
And I just mean for a time certain, until people are back on their feet and, our revenue stream is increased. I mean, certainly the benefits of a turf field, especially in a town that has well water. I mean, it'd be great. You don't have to water it. We don't have to put fertilizers out and chemicals on the field that end up back in the water stream. So I bet you there's money in a conservation grant for items like this. But I just don't think it wouldn't be my priority.
So it's not our place to ask for a legal ruling or
Well, we could.
in terms of what.
We could. I mean, we could ask our council for it, I suppose, but I know Copeland and Page, I mean, they probably have somebody there that could give us an opinion relatively quickly and, understand this topic. I mean, they have an expert in just about every area of municipal government in that firm, so.
Perhaps David could talk to Greg Balcones, and because I know that the selectmen also have some questions and want to make sure everything's buttoned down before this goes forward. I know the Hillview is excited about the project and wants to move forward with it, but I
We're
do think-
excited about it too.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the direction we're gonna go in. I mean, as far as the agreement itself, speaking to that, I've gone through it, and I know Maureen's gone through it. And I don't think it's a major issue. I do think that, the school department has to be reinserted into a
Right,
number
there's some
of these
places where we're
paragraphs
missing, right.
where we belong. And if there's gonna be a sharing, similar to the agreement that we signed for the tennis courts,
Right.
then I've tried to clean up some of the language here, and I think it has to be redrafted without changing the substantive, value of it, but changing some language in it for sure.
Yeah, I went through Richmond. I thought the key thing I found was the school department seemed to be missing in some of the paragraphs and some of the parts of the agreement where we should be.
But for paragraph 4, which,
Right.
kind of put us back into the picture.
Right.
Everything in the affirmative is through recreation.
Right.
So I think that we need to at least, and again, it's not a
Not
power
a big
struggle
issue,
at
right,
all. It's
no.
just to make sure we're properly protected because it is school property and the primary use of it is for
Exactly.
school-related athletics and physical education, things of that nature.
Other than that, I didn't see any major issues with it.
No.
What is the imperative of doing this instantly? Is there some pressing need to do this right now?
I think one is the field is in deplorable condition, I think is pretty safe to say.
Two is if this, I mean, if Maureen suggests that there isn't other use for the funds, we'd have to really consider that. But the other thing is, we'd like to get things done once in a while if we can. I mean, and if you travel around, I mean, to other towns, it doesn't make this a necessity, but it's certainly, almost every other school in the Cape Ann League and most other schools in eastern Massachusetts either have one or have one in the planning stage.
Yeah.
I'd just like to see how this interfaces with something going on at the high school in the way of a renovation or modification to the high school, because we put in a new field, we can't use it because of the way the high school is situated and construction going on.
Well, having looked at all of that.
It would be.
Having looked at that, I think the one good thing about it is the location of the field is such that we could probably work any high school project around the location of the field. But I hate to say it, Cliff, if you and I wait for that, you and I may never see the turf field. I mean, I just, seriously, it could take a long, long time to get a high school project done, particularly under these circumstances.
If not done,
Yeah.
at least understand what it's going to
Yeah.
look like
Yeah.
and how that area might be used in an effort to reduce the cost of a high school. I mean, you can build a skyscraper in a city block with no lay-down area at all, but it's very expensive to do that as compared with having a lay-down area for material and equipment and being able to function in a more logical way.
I mean, I do think because the field being as adjacent as it is to the road and where it is, that it's kind of on the perimeter of the high school property, so that it would probably in all likelihood not interfere with the construction or renovation of a new high school, but.
And that is an issue we discussed in the past when we talked with the secondary school building committee. And it seemed like that, as Jerry was saying, that area would not be impacted by a construction project. Obviously, you never can tell 100%, but I think that was the conclusion we had reached, which is why Recreation, I think, has moved forward with this, with us, and with the Hillview. So. Okay. Next, we have a,
How do you want to,
Yeah.
we
Do you
have
want
to send
us-
this back.
Do you want us to?
I think we need to,
Send them to me and see if I can.
Yeah, I have mine
Together,
here,
right?
I'll give it to you. But I do think we need to send something
Right.
back to them with, in exchange maybe, like we do with the tennis courts. I mean,
Right.
David and I went back and forth several times and exchanged proposals.
I think if Jerry got his changes to you, and then you circulated it among the committee, and we all look at it, I think that's probably the best way to proceed at this point, and then if we're comfortable, we can get it back to Rec and Selectmen and Hillview. All right, good. Next fiscal year, 2010 budget development. Carl, before you, I just wanted to clear something up for myself. I was having a hard time at the last meeting understanding the increase of 7.8%, and the way I'm understanding it now is, we had always talked in the past about the level services budget would increase somewhere between 5 and 6% on an annual basis, mainly based on the salary increases, both steps and cost of living. This time, we're at 7.8%. I think the two main factors there are special education, and then the other one, which I want to make sure I have right, is this year, we've actually hired more teachers than were in the budget in order to save us from potential out-of-district placements, which would have ended up costing us, we would guess, a lot more money than hiring those teachers. Is that correct? And now to carry those teachers forward, it increases the salary budget even more than we would have increased it from what we budgeted last year.
Yes, to begin with, as you noted, the special education increases for FY10 are unusually high. The increase that we're forecasting in special education alone amounts to just short of $300,000. And that's not an estimate. It's a number that comes from a student-by-student analysis of what next year's cost is going to be, and new residents that we already are aware of that will be within our roles next year. So that is one of the factors that brought us up above that 5 or 6% baseline that you allude to. And then secondly, yes, I couldn't say it any better than you. The new faculty hires, new teacher hires, mean that we had budgeted one figure for our teacher salaries for FY09. It ended up being 4 or 5 employees higher than that. So you have to factor those 4 or 5 employees in to help explain the delta between FY09 teacher and FY10.
Right, so they weren't in the original budget.
No, they
So
weren't.
then when you add them next year, it makes the increase look a lot higher.
Exactly.
Okay.
So,
Are you talking about this increase, the teachers line, that went up 612?
I'm not sure. Yeah, because I believe that what we did was to avoid potential outplacements in some cases, we hired teachers for special ed needs that weren't in the original budget. Correct?
that's right.
But
And so now to carry those forward, that makes our salary line increase even more than it would increase under just normal conditions with step and cost of living increases.
Well, I'll wait till we get to this page unless you mind. It's just not adding up, though, to me. We've got an increase in teachers of $612,000. And you've got a note that says $273,000 is step increases. And the remainder is new hires.
No, there's a salary pool in there too, I think, Maureen. Am I correct, Carl?
Yes.
All right, because the explanation just says the remainder is
Well-
new hires. So I thought it can't be
Well, I might be wrong, but I
339
thought
new
there was a
hires.
salary.
No, you can't. You
No,
said
the-
5 teachers.
No?
Well, there's the
5 teachers would put you at about that number,
The-
5 or 6
All right.
teachers.
salary pool is outside of that number.
Okay, so then $339,000 is new hires.
Well, there's a lot of little factors as well. Do you want to go through this?
Let's go through this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you put this in context with what, we're talking about the preliminary budget, all right? And I believe the questions here are coming up, have been raised on the salary page
Mhm.
for teachers, and why that number is, if you're looking at the preliminary budget on page 3 of the preliminary budget, where it shows,
You don't have it.
you don't have the teacher
No,
budget?
I don't have the budget with.
Four. The handout in tonight's packet is page 4.
Okay. Well, the question came from the preliminary budget and why that number was up
I think
as
that,
high as it was.
and also tied into that is why the total budget, it ties directly into why the total budget is increasing 7.8% for
Exactly.
level services.
Well, I think what might be helpful is for me to take that $612,000 and break that down for you. I've already broken down the salary by category. Now, I'm not prepared to do that to the dollar rate at this point, but that's what my next step would be, to provide you additional information there. There are several smaller factors. One of them I would point out to you on that same page, item 22. Item 22 is entitled Unidentified Reduction. It's only $38,000, but it means that when the FY09 budget was appropriated, we still hadn't yet applied this $38,000 anywhere. In other words, we were coming up short. And it's not unusual that we enter a fiscal year with a deficit that we have to figure out as the year goes on. My point in raising that is that ultimately becomes part of the problem, because it's a shortfall on one side and it ends up being kind of displaced for FY10. But Maureen, let me put together a document that breaks that 612 down right to the
Okay.
dollar. And I think that's the best way to go to help that be understood better. In anticipation of discussing this page, Superintendent and I did go through the teacher FTEs from FY09 to FY10 on a case-by-case basis, so we could best understand the changes in our teaching loads. So I need to take that information and apply dollars to it and send that out.
And David, you mentioned in here that we will need is that our next meeting to approve the recommended fiscal year 2010 budget?
Well, we have, just the timeline on this would be that we have the formal public budget hearing on March 9th. I don't have the exact date yet when the warrant is going to print.
I don't. I don't think we've been told.
Yes, but it's generally right around that first week. Has to be put together, right around that first week or second week in March. So my thinking is, with school committee meetings, either voting on number the 23rd or the 9th at the absolute latest. And the 9th is really pushing it very late.
Okay.
A number,
Right, that's exactly what I.
which is the recommended,
Right,
the school committee's recommended number.
right.
But this year, there are so many assumptions in this, and at some point, we have to put a number in the warrant.
Well, what is the number right now, David?
Well, here's the,
Well,
I had a message from Selectman Chairman Masseri today saying that they're hoping to come up with a more firm number tonight for schools and for the town budget at their selectman meeting. Now, we have a number that shows about, and again, I've had discussions with Carl on this, I haven't been able to get to the town finance director on this, that show us getting a slight increase in the school budget for next year, a slight increase over current fiscal year. Not nearly enough to cover most of what we need, but a slight increase. Mr. Morsari said tonight they were going to be discussing transfers from other funds, and he didn't provide any details, but hoping they would come up with a with a more definitive number